A little 49ers camp Q&A as preseason football gets started. Hall of Fame game, getting some clues to the new kickoff, what that might look like in live action. And, of course, talking Hall of Fame, Patrick Willis getting ready to be inducted this weekend. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We, of course, love and appreciate all of our everydayers out there, and we especially love it when you hit that subscribe button. So while you're here, hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. We are live on YouTube once again this week. I want to get into a little bit of a Q&A, so let us know what you want to talk about here in the chat as we roll through this one. Do you want to talk about more rumors of Brandon Aiyuk contract potentially being on the way? Patrick Willis getting ready to get in the Hall of Fame. A lot of folks will be there, including his former teammates and some that are now current coaches of the Los Angeles Chargers, including his old head coach in Jim Harbaugh, will be there as well. And so that's going to be a fun ceremony on Saturday. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down and the sport stops sporting like we want them to, this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. What do we think about the Hall of Fame game, Croc? You pumped for some preseason football, a bunch of fourth stringers out there in this one, but some clues to what the new kickoff might look like.
The cool thing is just kind of having it on in the background. You don't pay a whole lot of attention. Football is back. Dante Pettis just muffed a punt. So not looking good for Dante Pettis. He's still hanging around the league right now, returning punts for the Chicago Bears. But you do get to see some new things, and one of the new things is the kickoff and kickoff coverage and what that would look like. And I think a lot of people just assume, oh, man, like they're lined up here. It's going to be so easy. You're going to see all these returns. And I remember saying it. I was watching the highlights of the XFL or UFL, whatever it's called now. And it was like they showed a return for a touchdown, and it happened to be week 7. And they were like the first return of the year. So I'm like, I don't think it's going to be that easy. And lo and behold, I'm watching it tonight, seeing some returns, and it doesn't look that easy. It doesn't look like you're just going to see all kinds of kick returns taken to the house. So I am excited to continue to see what it looks like, but it is definitely a new, interesting dynamic to the game.
Joseph in the chat says the new kickoff is hot garbage. So I don't know that. I hope it makes it more exciting.
I
only saw one. I didn't watch a lot of the game, but I'm trying to figure out what the 49ers think about it, because they're just throwing like 9 different guys back there to try to return kicks. So I'm not sure anybody really knows yet. I'm sure all the teams are watching this Hall of Fame game and trying to get some clues to what might happen, how it might look, how it might break down, but not a bunch of big plays yet.
I think people don't like change, and this is something changed. I mean, our whole life we've seen kickoff and kickoff return look a certain way. I really just don't care. Either way, it's a part of some of the new rule changes, but there will still be a kickoff, because remember for a while they were talking about wiping out kickoff return altogether. I'm like, okay, I am not for that, but you have some semblance of a return. It just looks a little different, but I am curious to see how guys kind of maneuver around it and how they work to maybe spring off some big returns.
Did you see the rumor from Colin Cowherd? Colin Cowherd tweeted today, Thursday, that he said, keep an eye out for Brandon Aiyuk news, #New Deal SF. So Colin Cowherd hearing that maybe there is a new deal on the way for Brandon Aiyuk. What are your thoughts on that? Because we kind of talked about reading body language with the DAP that happened at practice yesterday. I thought it did seem more like a potential deal was maybe done there, if there was something to it at all. I don't know if there was anything to it. The 49ers aren't big on leaking that kind of information. And when they do leak stuff, they do it on purpose to a very small amount of people, I think. And a lot of the times when deals do get done, we don't hear a lot about it first. And you mentioned that yesterday during our podcast, Croc.
The interesting thing, we talked about that handshake a little bit more off camera. You and I were like, we really started to diagnose it. We talked about it, when we were live, but we went back and we're watching them like, it's a little awkward. It's like, you see how far Aiyuk goes, and then he like at the end of it kind of does like this moonwalking thing where he starts kind of like backing out, and he's like, oh, okay, guess I'm just gonna go this way. Like it was just a lot of awkward stuff, but maybe Aiyuk is just a little awkward. That could be the case, and if he is, maybe the handshakes, the talks, the excitement in the handshake of Kyle Shanahan meant that a new deal was coming, which you kind of alluded to as we were talking about it, and Colin Cowherd is saying it. Oh, he said Mike Silver shut it down.
Yeah. So apparently some other reporters have said no, they don't think so. It was either Rappaport or Schefter, I think, that might have said no. They think it maybe even is the other way. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about this.
Mike Silver, he's pretty close to things. Like
but
remember, these guys, they might have rumors, but I feel like Silver. He's like in the Bay Area. I think he really kind of talks to people directly. Like he must know some people. He's been reporting there for years. I didn't realize like for a while how close he was to the Bay. I just thought he was like an Adam Schefter, just somebody talking on TV. But he actually covers sports in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And obviously he has good insight of what goes on with the 49ers. So at the very least, I put more stock into what he says as opposed to Colin Cowherd.
Yeah, Silver's a Cal guy, if I'm not mistaken. He's been around the Bay Area a long time before he kind of started doing the national thing and the NFL network thing. But maybe remember during the theory was during the draft, Croc, or after the draft, that Mike Silver's source got outed with the fake Cooper DeJean leak. Remember? And then like they were leaking information about we're trading Debo, we're not trading Debo, we're trading Aiyuk, we're not trading Aiyuk, and that maybe they're trying to out their source and their rat in the building. And so who knows? Maybe Mike Silver doesn't have his connect anymore inside the building. We'll see.
Well, that's unfortunate because the 49ers have early on, they were really tight knit with stuff. I mean, when John Lynch was hired, that was one of the best kept secrets. Like I remember hearing it on TV. Mm-hmm. Like, John Lynch, is there another John Lynch?
Same thing. I was like, oh man, there must be a guy named John Lynch that's in a front office somewhere that I never heard of before. And like, no, it's the former All-Pro safety John Lynch. Is the GM of the Niners. Like, what the hell?
And we had no idea, right? I feel like as of late, and maybe they are trying to weed out some of these guys that are kind of talking a little too much. But as of late, I feel like things have been getting out a little bit more. They still kind of carry that reputation of having this, like the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, like they have this reputation of being really good, and they like haven't been quite as good lately. They're kind of like aging a lot. I think the 49ers have this reputation of being tight knit and they don't have leaks. And it's like, last few years they done had some damn leaks.
LKV in the chat says that the rat for Silver is actually Jed York. So there you go.
I could see.
What if they told Jed York the wrong guy that they're drafting? How about
Jed York wants to be involved so bad with everything, and he's done a terrific job. I was talking to a Cowboys fan at training camp, and he's like, man, Jerry Jones needs to just get out the way. I was like, I remember a time when Jed York needed to get out the way, and he made the hires with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, and then he got the hell out the way. So we don't hear much from him now, except for I think when they were drafting Trey Lance and they were all drunk together. But aside from that, and him like throwing these little clues that weren't clues about who the 49ers are picking, you don't hear much from him.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about Aiyuk, and when we did the Zapruder film style breakdown of it off the air, so we'll talk a little bit about what we thought there, just because it's a funny topic, I don't know, to me. And there's not a lot of hard news right now with the San Francisco 49ers. More camp Q&A as well. What do you guys want to talk about with the San Francisco 49ers? They brought in some guards today, some interior offensive linemen. I think what that clues into with this football team at this current juncture in preseason, in training camp. And Patrick Willis getting ready to go officially into the Hall of Fame this weekend. All that and more next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps you ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home that W. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. So anybody out there who's really trying to get to the bottom of the handshake thing with Brandon Aiyuk midfield with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, I think the funniest way to look at it is to look at them all separately and just watch one person the whole time. And if you do that, you get 3 different vibes. And to be honest with you, I think that's what's going on. I think there is 3 different vibes. So if you watch Aiyuk, he's like kind of serious about it. The way he walks up cockeyed, the way his handshake is so far away, but his long little arms.
That's what stood out, right? Like just usually, and again, I don't know their relationship, but when you dap up the homie, you kind of bring it in a little bit, like him and Kyle Shanahan. But it was there was a decent amount of distance. Now, we could be looking far into this, but there was a nice distance between Aiyuk and John Lynch. And I noticed that. I'm like, that's a little weird, like that space between those guys. Like it was very forced. It was a very forced handshake.
And John Lynch's was a little bit cautious. It was like, oh, Aiyuk's here. Okay. Oh, hey, what's up, man? It was like a little awkward. Like, oh man, I didn't expect to see him creeping up behind me.
Let me get back to catching these balls from Kyle.
Yeah. And then he turns his head real quick because like he doesn't want to get hit in the head with the football. He's playing catch, I think, with Kyle. But then he looks back and there's no football coming because Kyle's running over like old buddy, right? And like daps him up and they hug each other. And it was like almost like he hadn't seen him, even though he has seen him. They've been in meetings. He's been around the building. So when I saw that, and if you just watch Kyle by himself, it's like, oh, the deal's done. And you know how Kyle talks, like, heck yeah, dude, congrats, you earned it, man. You know, that's kind of the vibe I got from. So I was like, oh, a deal's done. If you just watch Kyle Shanahan, if you just watch Aiyuk, there's something going on there. And if you just watch John Lynch, then it's just kind of awkward. Like he doesn't know how to feel about it. So that's the vibe I get, which means I have no idea what's going on.
The moonwalking thing is just like just let me go back over here, because it was like they just went back to doing whatever they were doing. They went back to doing that, and now you just like, okay, what do I do now?
Slowly backs out of the scene. Yeah. So funny. I love it. I love that kind of stuff. And obviously, to be honest, it probably means nothing, but we'll find out. Maybe there's a deal imminent. And by the way, according to Silver, not only is there not a deal, there's not a trade either. So who knows? Patrick Willis going into the Hall. I will have a lot more to talk about this after the weekend because we'll have all the speeches and we'll get a vibe from Patrick Willis as he goes into the Hall. Saw a clip of him with the box and he got his suit and his gold jacket delivered. And so he's ready for the ceremony. Fantastic stuff there. And somebody sent us something about who's going to be there with him. And Jim Harbaugh, his former coach, has chartered a flight to attend Patrick Willis's Hall of Fame ceremony on Saturday. And it'll include several of his former teammates and some of these guys coaches with Jim Harbaugh now in Los Angeles. Navarro Bowman, Jonathan Goodwin, Mike Iupati, Will Tukuafu, Deshaun Goldson, Delaney Walker, all of them will be at the ceremony. I'm sure there's going to be some former 49ers. I wonder if Frank Gore is going to be there too. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them. And it's always an event when a 49ers inducted into the Hall of Fame, which has happened numerous times, and it's always fun every single time.
I think the Patrick Willis one, I was really excited about that because a lot of times you just know a guy is getting in, right? When Trent Williams gets selected for the Hall of Fame, we know that first ballot. But with Patrick Willis, I think Luke Kuechly is in his ballpark as well. It's like, did they quite do enough? And you remember Terrell Davis, he didn't have this long, illustrious running career, and he had like a few or 2 to 3 great years. And then after that, like, but he won multiple Super Bowls. Willis, it was a bunch of all pros early on, did terrific. And then all of a sudden he retires and he felt like a Hall of Fame player because during that time, it's like, well, he's the best linebacker in the NFL for a stretch of years, if not number one, number two, right? Because you had other good guys, Patrick Willis, Ray Lewis. and Luke Kuechly at a time during there as well. But I mean, Willis just first team All Pro, like just a bunch of years, and then he retired. And I was like, is he gonna get in? But he got in, man. And I think that was one where I was kind of excited to see how it would go. And I think Luke Kuechly is probably happy because his career kind of went very similarly, even though he has a Defensive Player of the Year award. But exciting stuff for him, and I can't wait to hear his speech.
And yeah, for Willis, and he was like an early modern day linebacker too. Like he could have absolutely played in this era, and he could also play in a throwback old school era. And his tape ages well. You go back and watch Patrick Willis right now, and you're like, oh my God, this guy was amazing. The way he flies around, the way he hits people. And he did cut his career a little bit short, but he didn't have put any ugly years on the end of his career. You know, he didn't collect stats. And I think it's really cool. But you never know how the voters are going to feel about that. And so it was really cool to see him get the nod and be like, yeah, you were the best in the game at this position. So you are a Hall of Famer. So yeah, I was really excited to see Patrick Willis getting, because I think he deserves it. And you never know with guys. And if he was, you know, if he met everybody's criteria with statistics and playing long enough and all those things. And I love the way that Patrick Willis went out. He's like, I want to be the guy that wows people. I don't want to be the guy who's out there slow and doesn't lost a step and isn't that same guy anymore. And he was dealing with some foot injuries, and he's always like breaking his hand, and had a club on his hand too. He had that as a rookie, I'm pretty sure. And might have had it in college as well, because just the reckless way he plays and hits people, hurting himself at the same time. So I appreciate that about him. He didn't want to just hang on. He wanted to be that dude. And so whenever you think of Patrick Willis, you always saw that amazing version of him. You never saw another version.
Could you imagine, you know, you do something, you play a profession at a high level, and then you retire when you're like 30 years old, 29? Like, I think when we hear the word retire, we just, oh, okay, they retire from the sport, but they kind of retire from working. And I mean, unless they get into coaching, but a lot of them, they retire from working. So what do you do? And I saw Patrick Willis. I think he's so bored nowadays. He was popping into spaces on Twitter and talking to the 49er faithful and answering questions. And I think that's cool. But I'm like, this dude must be hella bored. It has absolutely nothing to do. I saw him pop up a little bit on the little, they had this, he must have invested in it. It was kind of like this coach app, like a linebacker coach app, like get on there and you can, you know, kind of teach positions. And he was doing kind of positional drills. I'm like, okay, he must have invested in this, trying to get this up and going. But aside from that, I think Patrick Willis is hella bored.
You got to be. As LKV points out in the chat, Willis is still a young man. That always gets me too with guys who have retired, and they've been retired for 10 years. And then you see how old they are. They're like, oh, they're still 38 years old. And you're like, oh my God, man, I thought this guy was going to be 50, and they're still so young. Patrick Willis is definitely one of those guys because he didn't hang on.
I see it with my guy. You know, I coach high school football at Edison with my guy, Lavelle Hawkins. And Lavelle played, you know, 6-7 years in the NFL. And I see it with him. And he did a great job of investing the money that he made. So, like, he's good. Doesn't have to work ever again. But when you don't work, it kind of, it's like, what's your purpose? And I think Lavelle is having a hard time finding what his purpose is, because he wakes up, you know, just sits around, goes in his backyard, looks at the little water faucet thing he has, FaceTimes all his friends because he has nothing else to do. And then eventually it's like, okay, let me go up to Edison so I could just, you know, coach some football for the day. But I think these guys that retire and, you know, and they do well with their money, I think they're pretty bored.
Yeah, it's got to be really weird to retire young, and you got to find a way to occupy your time and do it in a way that doesn't destroy your life too, and just spend all that money that you had banked, or get into weird stuff. And you see a lot of players invest money, and some of them make some bad investments too, and get involved with some weird people and shady characters and lose a bunch of money. So you never know which direction that's going to go. And they got to be bored, and they've got to be, I wonder, like, because you pour so much of your life into one thing and then it just ends. Like, there's very few careers that are like that in the normal world, where you can't just kind of keep doing that job, right? And most people peak at their profession in their 50s, right? And so you're like going and you're at the CEO level. So unless you get into coaching or front office, that is not the way it is. You peak in your 20s. That's a weird feeling.
Very weird, man. And just to see it firsthand. I mean, between him and I coach with Desmond Bishop as well. And Des Bishop, you know, played with the Niners for like a year or so. You know, played 9 years in the league, won a Super Bowl with Green Bay. I think Dez is still aboard too. I randomly like check my phone and I'll see messages at 3 a.m. and Desmond's like, "Hey, Croc, man, what you think about this? We put this guy here and do this." Like, bro, go to sleep. But I don't think they have anything to do throughout the day.
And they can afford to do whatever they want too, so they can stay up late if they want, stay up early, get up early if they want. They can go travel here if they want.
Which isn't the case for a lot of guys. Like, guys go broke. I'm just surrounded by a couple that whatever investments they did make or whoever their investment people are, they've done very well to where they're good. They're chilling, like not even thinking about working. It's just super bored. But that's not the case for a lot of guys.
All right. Looking forward to the Patrick Willis induction ceremony and his speech. Let's get a little bit more into the 49ers here, current training camp, Q&A, your topics, your questions about the 49ers, including one about the newest members of potentially the 49ers working out some interior offensive linemen, what that means for some of the current group. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much. You never want them to stop, right? And I'm sure y'all feel the same way because that's why we're here, because you love sports. But as the playoffs started to wind down and you get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting quite like we want them to, excited that there's preseason football. By the way, you can bet on preseason football as well at FanDuel, but FanDuel lets the sports keep on sporting whenever you want. All you have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Olympics, Major League Baseball, and of course, all of the NFL futures, prop bets that you can handle, and now some actual preseason games to bet on if you have that sort of a vibe about a preseason game about maybe your favorite team. So head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Croc. One of the questions here in the chat is a good one because the 49ers worked out some interior offensive linemen this week. And Dan says, thoughts on the guards that worked out today. So the names are Scott Quessenberry, Pat Elflein, and Sean Harlow. I don't know much about Sean Harlow, but I remember Scott Quessenberry and his brother both coming out of college and into the NFL. Pat Elflein as well was a big-time prospect coming out of college, and didn't have the most amazing career. Ohio State, I think, for Pat Elflein, right? He's a well-thought-of college player and kind of stumbled in the NFL. But basically, these guys are interior offensive linemen, right? Guards, centers. So that tells me the 49ers are a little bit worried about their injury situation. And two of the main guys that have paved the way for Dominic Pooney to have such a great week in pads this week is Spencer Burford and John Feliciano's injuries. And Burford looks like it's going to be a multi-week injury, which means we could get pretty close to the regular season with him not being healthy. And then a guy who's able to start at guard and center, and John Feliciano is banged up as well. And I haven't seen what the prognosis is for John Feliciano's injury, but this tells me the 49ers are worried about it and they're bringing in players. And that's probably good news for Dominic Pooney's chances of starting as a rookie.
I'm glad you brought up the injuries, and this hits a little too close to home. When I was released by the New York Jets, you had Brian Winters, you had Joe McKnight, RIP Joe McKnight, and Chris Ivory. Their guys were hurt heading into the game, and they just had to release guys to make room so they can go into the game with more depth at the positions where the guys were hurt. And so when I hear that, right, like, oh, they signed a couple of offensive linemen, I'm just like, dang, because I know there's the Eric Crockers of the world where he got released to make room for these offensive linemen because these guys were hurt.
I thought about you the other day because the 49ers signed Frank Darby, the wide receiver from formerly of Arizona State. And to do that, they had to release a DB. And I thought about you, Croc. I was like, man, this guy was probably wanted to get himself in some preseason games, kind of try to go win a job. And he didn't get the opportunity to because the numbers, they needed it at another position. And if it would have been
Brandon Aiyuk being selfish, man, he's holding out, and now they got to get another receiver in there. I'm joking about Brandon Aiyuk being selfish, but again, I do. It just is close to real life, man. No, those guys, man, and it's like, oh man, and it's not personal, it's just business. But it just is what it is. And then it's tough for a guy like that because, dang, I couldn't go into the preseason game. Like, there's no film. Hopefully he's on the short list, but right now everybody has kind of their 90. when you said Darby, I don't know why it didn't occur to me that it was Arizona State Darby. I liked him. He played with Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, he was teammates with Aiyuk and Pearsall at Arizona State.
Yeah, I liked Darby. I remember him. Where was he in the NFL?
I don't remember. He bounced around, I think, to a couple teams. I think he was drafted really late, 6th or 7th round. And I don't think he's played much at all for any team. But I definitely remember him in the draft process.
Yeah,
and actually, you mentioned preseason games. I think it's a big part of it. Like the 49ers probably don't want to play their starters and maybe not even their second string that much in the first preseason game. They need bodies on the field. So if your linemen are hurt, you need a third string guard to even get through a preseason game. So that's part of it. And we might see a lot of those types of signings this week.
Yeah, I think the league is going to that just in general. I mean, how many teams are really playing their starters? And, I think Sean McVay maybe it was who really started this thing where it's just like, I'm just not playing my guys at all in preseason. And, I do just enjoy, watching the starters go out there for a possession or two. But it definitely makes more sense to make sure that you have a certain amount of depth at certain positions because your guys, they just won't be playing much. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, he's muted there. Yeah, in the chat it says digging Peacock as a floating head. If you're watching on YouTube, I do have a dark background and a dark shirt on, so I'm not quite a floating head, but I guess that's why we usually go light background.
I like that look though. I told you before we got on there. I'm like, man, I'm digging the all black background.
Like a little mahogany back here. I've been on the road all week. Another road game for me here. Luckily, finding places to get these podcasts out and talk to the people, and appreciate the fam and appreciate some hotel rooms that have had some nice enough internet that I can do some live streaming and live podcasts. So love that. Who will be the 49ers punt returner, Croc?
Gosh, I don't know why the first name that came into my head was Trent Taylor, but I just don't know if there's a
He's got the experience.
He definitely has the experience, and he's been a good returner. Now, he's obviously wasn't a guy who was just for the 49ers at least, and I'm not exactly sure what he did with the Bengals, but for the 49ers, and I think he was with the Bears too, I believe. But for the 49ers, he wasn't breaking off these like long runs, but he was sure-handed and giving you about 9 yards per return, which would be good for like top 10 in the league. So he was a solid return man, a guy that was reliable. And if he is going to make it for the 49ers, he's going to need a couple things. One, maybe some injuries, and you never want to wish injuries on guys, but that's going to be his path to make it. And two, if he can break off a couple nice long returns in preseason, that could really help him. Because again, we're talking about guys who will play and who won't play. He'll definitely be playing.
And I think Cowing is really hurt by getting hurt. His injury doesn't allow him to go show his ability right now. And if he misses a few weeks, he needs that preseason to prove that he's going to be a guy who's sure-handed catching punts. And early in camp, he was dropping a couple punts. And in fact, there was a report that Kyle Shanahan was yelling at him after he dropped the punt, which is not good. That's not the way to get yourself out on the field. And so if you're not going to be playing on special teams and you're like the 5th wide receiver, you're probably not even going to have a uniform on game day. So it's important for Cowing to get out there and practice, show he's going to be sure-handed on punts because he would seem to have the good skill set. And before camp started, I probably would have guessed Cowing to be that guy. But being out there, Croc, with you, I think the most sure-handed guys catching punts were Trent Taylor, and he's the old veteran, and Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall looked really natural catching those punts. And so
Ronnie Bell, too. We can't forget about Bell.
Yeah, and Ronnie, he didn't drop any, but I think he's dropped some. He's been less sure-handed according to some folks in camp this year, but he's definitely a guy who's better. I would think of all like the bottom of the roster wide receivers. I would think that Ronnie Bell's the best core special teamer as far as coverage, right? Because Trent Taylor's not that guy. He's not, really twitched up and fast and a big enough guy to go down and make a bunch of tackles on special teams, even though he could do it. Pearsall, I'm not sure if he's built that way, but it'd be interesting to see him as a gunner on special teams, right? I think Ronnie Bell's got that more defensive mentality as far as coverage units, but I think he's probably at best 3rd as far as return guy.
Yeah.
Danny Gray's
a guy that is returning that had experience last preseason doing punt returns and kickoff returns as well.
Yeah. And then with the kickoff return stuff, they threw everybody in the running back room except for Christian McCaffrey, but then also Deebo Samuel as well. So they had like 9 different guys, including Kyle Juszczyk back. So we might see some fullback type of lead runs. I don't know what to expect from the kickoff return group. I think Deebo's the best suited to do it. Will they allow Deebo to do it? I don't know. So if I had to guess today, right now, just because of who might make the roster in a numbers crunch for Trent Taylor, just because Pearsall's so much more likely he's locked into the roster, I'm going to guess Ricky Pearsall's the punt return.
LKV in the chat says Chris Conley is the gunner.
Yeah.
And, you want to talk about impact. I know a lot of people kind of gloss over special teams until it kind of bites you in the butt, but he was really good in the Super Bowl. So, that's the last image that we have of Chris Conley. It was what he did in the Super Bowl, whether it was a catch or so that he had. I think he had 1 catch, but it was a nice kind of clutch timing catch. And then what he did on special teams, he may have had 2 tackles all game, but they were key special team stops. So those were definitely things that stick out to where now we have guys in the chat like, oh, Chris Conley, that's our gunner. And when we do the numbers, right, when you crush the numbers on who the receivers are going to make the team, you go Deebo, Pearsall, Aiyuk, right? And then you go Juwan Jennings because they just re-upped him. So now you have 1, maybe 2 more spots.
And Cowling's a 4th rounder. They're not going to bail on him.
They're not going to cut him, and they're not going to open him up to practice squad. They may try to sneak him on IR, and that's something that they'll do. But you go Cowling. Now, okay, there's 1 more spot. So you got Ronnie Bell, Trent Taylor, Chris Conley. He's going to be that mix. Conley being a veteran.
Danny Gray.
Danny Gray, but Conley being a veteran, it's tough because if he's active come week 1, his contract is guaranteed for the entire season, and they try to stay away from that.
Oh, yeah. They're going to do the thing where they cut him and bring him back.
That's what they will ideally do.
But if I had to keep one guy out of that group, I would pick Conley because he can kind of do everything. He can play on special teams. He can play multiple spots at wide receiver and has proven he can do it in NFL games. I don't think that Trent Taylor's dynamic enough in the return game to make me want to pick him over Conley. So I would just trust that other guys, running backs at kickoff, and Pearsall could be the punt returner for you, and maybe Cowling as well. So I'd probably pick Conley out of that group.
And Conley, watching Conley during practice, it was very interesting. It was almost like he was a guy that's I've been here. He felt very comfortable, and you saw his energy. You saw a bounce in his step. You watch him run from drill to drill. I watched him do one-on-ones in a drill where I thought the 49ers cornerbacks were kicking the receivers' butts. Watching Conley win a few of those reps, that's a guy with a very well-rounded skill set that's tailor-made to be the 6th receiver on the team and active on game day. He is kind of what you're looking for. But again, he is the veteran, and once that money gets guaranteed, or you start to kind of get in that part of your career, it starts to get a little tough to make the initial 53-man roster. You're muted.
Sorry, I keep muting myself here. Vietas says, kind of continuing on our conversation about the preseason games. We'll end it here, Croc. Do they play the starters now that there's only 3 preseason games? I'm gonna spin it to you another way, Croc. How many quarters do the starters play combined in 3 preseason games?
Quarters?
Yeah.
I think we could say how many possessions.
Oh, okay. So we're not even going to get to a quarter of play.
If we say 4 possessions, maybe that's about a quarter and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you would set the over-under at 2.
1.5?
Or 1.5?
Yeah.
And
I like that. I'd take the over. I think 2 quarters. I think they could sneak into the second quarter of one of the preseason games, like that 3rd preseason game, maybe play a series or 2 in the first couple. So I'll say around 2 quarters total.
I don't even know if you're going to see them in the first game.
Yeah, you might not. There's plenty of guys to watch on the second unit, which has me excited though for preseason games, even if the starters don't play at all.
Last year they didn't play any starters in that first preseason game against the Raiders.
My memory shot. I was trying to think of that, and I couldn't remember at all.
They didn't. I was there, so I remember.
Okay.
It was Trey Lance started it, then Sam Darnold took over.
Okay.
And with Trey Lance,
so that was a little bit different Because was there no first team offensive lineman in there at all?
No starters.
No
As a matter of fact, there was one guy who we thought was a starter, Isaiah Oliver, and he was playing. So we're like, oh, there's a starter. And then come to find out he wasn't a starter, but that was it. Everybody else, they sat.
So then a series in game. So week 2 preseason, there's like one series, and then the next game, couple of 3 series. So maybe a quarter and a half, maybe the under on a quarter and a half.
This is part of it though. They had joint practice with the Raiders, so maybe because of joint practice. Do they have those set up this year?
With the Saints, they have, and that's Kyle Shanahan loves that. He loves that more than camp. Loves it more than preseason. He loves the joint practices. That's the Saints game, is the joint practices. As 49ers Throwback says, hit that like button. Appreciate all the everydayers joining us here as we end the week. Pumped for Patrick Willis going into the Hall of Fame. We'll talk about his speech and another week of training camp with Croc and myself. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube and everywhere you listen to this podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, or back Monday right here. Locked On 49ers.